You can't imagine a situation where not having Myles as a part of the organization is best for the Browns. So I just want to hit that off the top, and with that, I'll open up for questions.
How did you feel when he expressed no confidence in you producing a winner?
Yeah, Tony, I think if you by that you mean the trade requests, I think trade requests, they happen across the league all the time, and I think at times for individual players that they'll have certain interests during different parts of their career, whether they're a young player, a veteran player, things like that. That's not unusual. It's not the first for us. It probably won't be the last. It's not the first across the league, but we appreciate Myles, and like I said, we're not interested in moving him.
But you said your vision doesn't align with his and being winning team.
Yeah, so I didn't see maybe that specific thing, Tony, but like I said, we've had plenty of dialogue with Myles, really since he's been a Brown, and certainly after the season with him in his camp. Certainly understand his frustration from last year. We're all frustrated, but our focus is obviously making the changes and the pieces to make sure that we don't feel like we did at the end of last season.
So along those lines, he seems like he's kind of drawn a line in the sand a little bit on he definitely wants out. But do you feel confident there's like a path forward where you guys can be simpatico and get back on the same page?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, understand the frustration. We've had plenty of dialogue, but ultimately my responsibility is to make the decisions that are best for the Browns, and having Myles a part of the organization is a huge piece of that. Yeah, so Scott, we've had plenty of dialogue, throughout the season and after the season ended. Certainly both him and his camp, both before and after the trade requests, and again, our interest is in keeping Myles in Cleveland.
Andrew, were you aware of the trade request? The team know it was coming.
We were aware it was a possibility with the conversations that we had.
And did you know that statement was coming up?
Yeah, I wouldn't get into those specifics. But again, like our focus is on building the team, and again, Myles has got to be a big part of that.
How many calls have you got?
I wouldn't really touch on any conversations that I had with other teams, just respectfully. I don't think that's appropriate just for current and future business, but it's irrelevant to this situation because we're not interested in moving Myles.
So is there an offer that can change your mind, or is it just a hard line?
It would go to what I said before, Dan, where we don't have an interest in trading Myles. He's a big part of our team.
If you guys do an extension with Myles, and you did tell us at the Super Bowl that you are interested in either a contract with Myles that you'd like to finish his career, is that something that you're necessarily looking at around the start of the year, or what's going on in the situation, so you know what your business is proceeding?
It's a good question, Mary Kay. I think if you've probably seen over the past 5 years, whenever you get into extension talks, they can happen at any time. I've learned not to predict those because oftentimes those negotiations, they can go up and down and back and forth. I think if you look at our history through 2020, we've had some that have occurred in March or April, some that have occurred in June and July, some that have occurred in season, and some who have occurred as late as December. So I can't begin to predict. But we really do take the approach with our cash and cap planning. We take a multi-year time horizon and to accommodate the flexibility that we need.
Andrew, when Myles met with you after the season, did you have some
Tony, I wouldn't go into the specifics in terms of those meetings. I don't think it's not something I've ever done with players and everything like that. I understand the interest in the question, but I just don't think it's appropriate to share.
You mentioned you have optimism that you can turn things around this season.
Yeah, listen, we have a number of really good people, in the organization, coaches, front office, players. We are looking forward to the opportunities that are in front of us, over the course of the spring, with both free agency, the draft, trade market, things of that nature. And, we're excited to continue building this thing and get it back on track.
How much cap? You expect you to get a credit for Sean's contract, and you're sure to get credit back to you for cap space?
I really do have a standard policy that I really don't talk about, contracts in public settings. So I understand the interest, but that's not something that I would address.
Can you give any details on how he needed surgery?
Yeah, so obviously Deshaun, he re-injured his Achilles. Unfortunately he turned his foot ankle area that caused the re-tear during the normal stages of the recovery process. I know there's been a lot of speculation and everything out there, but there's nothing nefarious. It's just an unfortunate accident. So our focus is on making sure that he gets healthy and can be back to normal.
Do you have any further clear idea of what's going to take?
Yeah, it's probably too early to pin that down with certainty. He will miss significant time. How far that spans into 2025, I can't give you a specific right now. He's shown to be a fast healer, and we're going to try and be as thoughtful and aggressive with the recovery process. But that's not something that I could predict at the current moment. Also, appreciate the hoodie.
How can you be sure there's a path forward when you have a guy who's so adamant that, hey, this is about what I want in terms of winning, not money, and how do you grow, I guess, past that?
Yeah, as I mentioned, actually, I think we're all frustrated with, not winning enough last year, and, certainly he shares in that sentiment. But at the end of the day, our decisions are about what's best for the Browns, and, what's best for the Browns is to have Myles on the roster.
What value did Mike bring to your team last season, and how did you think the season matured during his time?
Yeah, Mike's awesome. I think it starts with he has this infectious energy. He's a ball coach. He loves being on the grass. He loves being with players. He loves developing young coaches. I think the other thing that's very understated about Mike, you got to understand, Mike was a highly accomplished player at Ohio State, highly accomplished player in New England. Coached big-time football, great DC in Houston, and then a Coach of the Year in Tennessee. And despite all he's accomplished, he has the humility of a first-time QC coach in the league. And I think that that's something that's really endearing to the people that work with him. He can coach any position on the field, and he has more knowledge in his pinky finger than probably most people would in 20 years of football. And so New England's very, very, very fortunate to hire him, and I think he'll do a great job there.
How would you compare or evaluate the trade market at the top of the draft this year to maybe some other drafts seen at the top?
Yeah, I think honestly, at this stage, probably the trade market at the top of the draft, it's yet to maybe reveal itself. We still are really early in the evaluation process on the college side. I think that's something that will perhaps have more visibility over the next several months as teams can get you to know the prospects.
And Tommy talked about decision making being the number one trait he looks for in a quarterback. How in settings like this, is it in interviews? What is it how do you find
that part of it? Yeah.
Part of it?
That's a great question, Chris. I think it's twofold. I think, number one, there's a fair amount that you can tell from the film, how are they going through their progressions. Okay, this is the concept, this is the coverage, this is where you think they should go with the ball. But probably the bigger piece, as you mentioned, Chris, is the idea of talking to them during these settings and during the spring and really seeing how they think. Whether you talk through a successful play or, honestly, a lot of times that are more helpful is okay, let's talk through an unsuccessful play and see what led to the decision and then ultimately what they learned from it. So this time, beginning in Indianapolis is incredibly valuable for that position for those very reasons. But it's something by the end of the process that we do believe that we'll have a really good feel for.
Joel Bitonio has said he's not decided yet. How does that uncertainty affect you guys?
Zach, it's a good question. Joel is still deciding. We have really great dialogue, but we're prepared in both situations. That's a great question, Jory. I'll say, number one, it's not an easy, evaluation. I think it first starts with, what you really want to accomplish on the offense side of the ball. Look, we'd all want the person who can do everything, but there are only so few of those players that exist. So at that point, based on your existing infrastructure and what you want to do schematically, it's about prioritizing some of the must-haves. Chris mentioned earlier, decision-making, it's a big thing for us at the Browns. So that's a must-have. Guys that have that characteristic at an acceptable level or higher, will be prioritized maybe relative to others. In some areas, it may be arm strength or anticipation or the ability to move. And what you're doing, you're weighing these different bundles of characteristics, and then ultimately aiming at the ones that have the most of what you desire. Now, the added element or the added layer on top is availability and cost. And that's not something that we'll know for a couple weeks, but you do as much planning as you can because, free agency and the trade market, they generally take different twists and turns, or at least that has been our experience over the past 5 years.
Andrew, do you have any
I'm sorry, Zach, I didn't hear you. Yeah, so I think there are two things that I really respect and appreciate, that Howie has always done. I think, number one, just the philosophy of quarterback in trenches. That's something that's enormous, and I think it's pretty enduring in our sport. And I think the second thing is, Philly's creativity in terms of pulling every lever in terms of how they build the roster, whether it's drafts, whether it's trades, whether it's free agency, and how they both use and manipulate their resources. That's what makes them the best right now.
Andrew, are you willing to trade the second pick?
Yeah, I think all those discussions are too early. I guess I'm open to anything that would help us, improve the team. But none of those decisions have been made. Here, let me go here because you haven't asked a question yet, have you? Okay. Okay, I'll do you next. I'll get you next.
We have a unique prospect, Travis Hunter, quarterback, wide receiver. How do you value that? That's
Well, I'd say this in terms of Travis Hunter, cornerback or receiver. The answer is yes. So he can play both, and I think that's what makes him special. We would see him as a receiver primarily first, but I think part of what makes him a bit of a unicorn is the fact that he can do both at a high level. Go, James.
How would you describe the stress or angst that accompanies not having a long-term answer?
So I always have this saying. Whenever I talk to people who are earlier in their careers, and it's a piece of advice that I wish I had learned earlier and taken earlier, and it's just get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like there are things that are going to make you uncomfortable every offseason, especially when you're in essence, a risk-taking position, a risk-taking decision-making position, and that's like the reality of the beast. So at this point in my career, that's not something that really gives me a ton of anxiety. I'll come back to you. Let me get someone and I'll come back to you.
There are opportunities every offseason. What do you identify so far this offseason to improve the roster and trenches around the next season?
Yeah, it's a great question, but that's one that probably can't answer in terms of specificity. Don't necessarily want to show our cards, but I think there are always opportunities in every avenue. Whether it's the 11 draft picks that we have, whether it's on the free agent market and guys that are become available, and then certainly the trade market with some opportunities that are already available and others that we won't know about for the next couple weeks. So our big thing is flexibility and being opportunistic, and that'll continue to be the case for us. Go ahead, Tony's next.
Shedeur and Dean made several references to the Browns, whether it's playing Madden or his first visit, building Musgrave being his favorite. What do you make of all that?
I don't make much of it, Tony, just because it's a long way to go. But I will say this: we got a chance to spend some time with Shedeur at the East-West. We'll get some time to spend with him during the upcoming week. He's a fantastic individual. He's really smart, really driven. Grew up around football and was highly successful. So it's been a pleasure to spend time with him. We're looking forward to spending more over the next several weeks. But there's still a long way to go with everything, and so we'll work through that as appropriate. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the first part of your question. Yeah, so I'd say this. It goes, although Zach left, he asked this question and left, but it goes back to Zach's question in terms of where we are philosophically similar to Philly is that we do believe in building for the trenches. So there won't be a year that we don't do a ton of work on the big guys, including the edge rushers. Look, I think I heard the statistic yesterday that this year at the Combine there's a record number of defensive linemen that got invited, and that probably does tell you what you need to know about the class. That if you're looking for defensive linemen and you're looking for rushers, this is probably the right year to look.
Devon, second year in a row, obviously ends up with the end of the season with an injury, but then he has another procedure on that knee. How much of a concern is that for, especially at the weight he's currently carrying?
Yeah, so Chris, I'd say that the individual injury itself is. Let me knock on wood on this because this went the wrong way for us last year. But the injury individually of itself is not something that is creating a lot of anxiety. But what we do want to focus on is making sure that DeJuan can end the season healthy, because durability it's a huge part of it, and we're a better team when he's on the field and he's healthy. So that's a major focus of his offseason programming.
A couple more.
I'm sorry?
Why do you see Travis first?
I mean, honestly, Scott, I would say this: it's 6 one way, half dozen another. He can play both. I do think that there's just an element where his superpower, they're really his ball skills, and that's a position where you can use it 100 times during the season versus maybe 30 on the high end. But look, we'll have our coaches and scouts fight it out in terms of where he should be on the board. But any team he goes to, we'll be happy to have him.
How much does job security factor into the front office decision-making process?
It doesn't at all. That's not something I spend any time on. I have too much respect and appreciation for everybody in the organization, and really make decisions accordingly.
Do you expect JOK to play?
Yeah, Tony, I wish I had a specific update for you on Jeremiah. I can say that he's slowly making progress. He's going through all that's required medically, but I don't have anything specific on that right now. I'm sorry? Yeah, he's tough, physical, a rare athlete with outstanding speed. He's special in his own regard that he can play off the ball, he can rush the passer. So he's an excellent prospect.
Last one here.
Andrew, could you see the team maybe changing quarterback plans to better suit Myles Garrett to better long-term option?
It'd be what I mentioned a little bit ago. Our job is ultimately to make the decisions that are best for the Browns organization. And oftentimes you want to make all of your players, your coaches, staff as happy as possible with their interests. But those interests always have to be aligned with what's best for the team, and that'll always be front and center in our decision making process. All right, thank you, everyone.